So for those of you who don't know, my name is Gary Marshke. As Mary Kay said, I'm the Outreach and Development Manager for NAMI Clackamas. And we're going to talk a little bit today about the basics of mental health, some myths, some truths, some facts about mental health. We are going to talk about suicide. So I do want you to know that if that happens to be a trigger for anybody, please do take care of yourself. Let us know in the chat or whatever if you need to talk offline. We're here and available to do that. But we are going to talk a little bit about that. But what I like to start off with, first of all, are a few eye-opening facts about mental health and essentially some statistics. So the ones in green are the ones that I think are most, how would I put it, most eye-opening, although all of them are pretty much a shock for a lot of people. 1 in 5 adults is going to experience a mental health disorder in any given year. That's the absolute truth. That's 20%. If you look at the suicide statistics, though, those are the things that we're focused on because that is such a big issue, especially among youth. The national average for suicide is 14.2 deaths per 100,000. You can see that the Clackamas County suicide rate is significantly higher. In fact, Oregon ranks 38th at 18.3, so you can see where Clackamas County would rank even lower. It is the second leading cause of death, and that should be 10 to 24-year-olds, not 10 to 14-year-olds. And there is one suicide death in this country every 11 and a half minutes. So those are some pretty sobering statistics and also good reasons why organizations like NAMI exist. So some myths around mental health. Children don't experience mental health problems. Well, I think those of us, those of you who might be parents of younger children might know better. 1 in 6 kids are going to experience some sort of behavioral or developmental or mental disorder. The most common diagnoses these days are ADHD, anxiety, and depression. And I think post-COVID and with everything that's happening these days, it's not surprising that those are the most common diagnoses. So children do experience mental health issues. We're seeing suicidal ideation among children as young as 6 years old. So another myth is that people with mental health problems are violent and unpredictable. And the National Threat Assessment Center has made it clear that there's not a barometer or mental illness is not a barometer for dangerousness. In fact, financial stressors in almost 3/4 of the case are the issues, unstable housing, another 40%, and then childhood trauma. And they also was a study done of mass shooters between 2010 and 2019. And you can see that 78% were motivated by fame or attention. So there is no direct correlation. There less than 5% of violent acts are committed by people who have serious mental health issues, and someone with a serious mental health issue is 5 times more likely to be a victim than a perpetrator. It is often a deflection for dealing with other issues that might be more germane to violent and unpredictable behavior, especially these days. So another myth is that suicide only affects people with a mental health condition. And of course, anybody that's had, and if I were here in a live group, I would ask the group to raise their hands to see how many people have had a suicide experience themselves, their family, their friends, their loved ones. And almost always, it's at least half to 2/3 of the group. We know for a fact that suicide affects everyone. Many people have effects after a suicide, even if it's somebody that you barely know, where you feel some guilt. You feel as though you might have been a failure. And the anger and the resentment about why did they do this? How could they do this to us, to me? Confusion over why they did it. And then, of course, some distress over the fact that they're gone. So suicide really does affect everyone. That is really a myth that I think deserves to be busted. And then another myth is that these are around suicides. And these are specific to suicide, that most suicides are caused by one particular trigger event. And we know that by and large, that's not true. It's usually a cascade of events, a lot of different things that happen, sometimes small things that accumulate, but it isn't one particular trigger event that causes a suicide. It may be one particular event that really tips the balance, but suicides really are a cascade of events. Most suicides occur with little or no warning. Again, we know that not to be true. What we do know as well is that we're not particularly well tuned in to those signs and signals. And when we are tuned in, we often don't know what to say. We don't know what to do. We don't know how to deal with it. And we're going to talk about that a little bit. It's best to avoid the topic of suicide, and that's absolutely not true. In fact, it's best to open the conversation, especially if you feel as though that person is having some sort of suicidal ideation. It really opens up the door for a frank and open conversation, a safe space. Using the word suicide is often very, very effective. You're not going to plant a seed in someone's mind to take their life. What you are going to do is you're going to create a safe space where they can talk about it, they can share their feelings, and you're letting them know that you understand and they're not alone. So it really helps to open up the conversation around suicide. Oops, sorry, my finger just goes a little crazy sometimes on these on my mouse. So it's not best to avoid the topic of suicide. You want to talk about it. People who talk about suicide don't do it. And again, that's by and large not true. There are some people that will keep that to themselves, but usually folks will talk about it. They'll say things, and we'll talk about that a little bit. They'll say things, they'll do things that indicate that they're considering suicide. And there are really good reasons for that. And it's really wrapped up in the last myth, which is a suicidal person clearly wants to die. And that is far from the truth. A suicidal person, by and large, wants to end the pain. If you've ever heard of the Golden Gate Bridge, you also might have heard about the Golden Gate Bridge study. And that was a study of suicide survivors who attempted suicide off the Golden Gate Bridge and survived. And to a person, every single one of those survivors, and unfortunately there were enough of them that there was a good sample, every single one of them said the same thing, that they did not want to die. The last thought they had when they took that final irrevocable step was, oh no, this is not what I want to do. A suicidal person wants to end the pain, the physical, the psychological, the emotional pain. And believe me, mental and psychological and emotional pain can cause physical pain. Anybody who's experienced it can tell you that. So a suicidal person doesn't want to die. They want to end the pain, and often reaching out and letting them know that you're there, that you care, that you're there to help them do something about it, can often be the shred of hope that they need to not attempt suicide. So here's some warning signs. You know what, and this is especially important to understand when you're dealing with younger children, because sometimes you will find younger children, for whatever reason, will be exhibiting some or all of these behaviors at some given point in time. Obviously wanting to die, no, maybe not so much, although they could actually mention that as a way of making fun or of being somewhat emotionally manipulative, feeling guilt or shame about certain things, being a burden to others. The hopelessness, the no reason to live, that often can be something that is very much associated with the angst of being a teenager. Extremely sad, unbearable emotional or physical pain. And then, of course, there's really some of the more obvious signs: changing behavior, making a plan, or researching ways to die. That can be a really good, strong indicator that someone is really having some suicidal ideation. Withdrawing from friends, taking dangerous risks. And of course, if anybody is a parent of a teen, they know that taking dangerous risks seems to be a part of their life. Extreme mood swings, eating or sleeping more or less, and then using drugs or alcohol, either at all or more often, depending on, of course, the age of the individual. So the interesting thing, or the thing to know about these particular behaviors is, well, they are routinely indicators of someone who might be having suicidal ideation. They aren't always the case. And that's really because what you really want to look at when you're looking at those behaviors are three particular things that will indicate whether or not that really is a serious issue. The frequency of the behavior. Does it occur more often than usual? That's something that's really important to identify. The intensity of the behavior. How intense is it? How deeply do they feel that way? Is it more intense than I've witnessed before? And then the duration of that behavior. Does it last longer than it has in the past? Have I seen this behavior before? Is it longer than it typically is it repetitive? Those are warning signs that if those things are the case, if it is more frequent than usual, if it is more intense than usual, and or if the duration is longer than usual, then it's time to really seriously have that conversation and get help as soon as possible. There are a number of ways to help. One of the best ways that we'll talk about a little bit is to lean in and ask the question. But really, frequency, intensity, and duration are the three criteria to use when looking at any of those behaviors. And trust your instincts, especially as a parent or a caregiver or a teacher or a counselor. You know the students reasonably well, hopefully, especially if they're your kids. So you're going to be able to tell if that frequency, intensity, or duration is out of character. But even if you suspect it, the best thing to do is to lean in, ask that question. Are you okay? You don't seem to be yourself these days. Is there anything that we can do? 988 is an incredibly effective resource. It started back in July of 2022. For those who don't know, 988 is the 911 for mental health issues. Excuse me. So if you have any particular situation where there is not immediate physical danger involved, as in a weapon or someone threatening behavior, then you want to call 988, not 911. 988 is for not only the individual experiencing the mental health issue, but also for anybody who's around them, who cares about them, who's trying to help them. Okay, they can provide information, they can provide advice, they can also often get the person on the phone and talk to them and talk them through it. The statistics that were shared with us through 988, they celebrated their first anniversary in July of this year. They handled hundreds of thousands of calls on a national level without a lot of infrastructure involved, because it was a brand new program. But they still handled all those calls. 96+% of the hundreds of thousands of calls that 988 handled were able to be taken care of on the phone without outside intervention, and less than 1% of those calls involved the police or 911. So 988 is a very, very effective resource. Thing to know about it is area code specific. So if you're calling from an area code outside of Oregon, you will be connected to operator and resources in that particular community where that area code originates. So you do want to let them know when you call that you're calling from Oregon, and if at all possible, you want to be connected to Oregon resources. Now, that doesn't preclude them from helping you on the phone. They're trained volunteers and staff, so they can really help you on the phone, regardless of where they're from. But if you want local resources, you need to let them know that you need to be connected with local resources here in Oregon or whatever community you're calling from. It is open to anyone, so don't hesitate to call. Keep that in your mind. 988, anytime that you or someone else you know or care about is in crisis. 988 is an invaluable resource. Many of the local police departments at their non-emergency numbers also have a mental health specialist that can help. They often can come out with a mental health resource team. We had an experience just yesterday in our office where we had a gentleman who came in to talk to one of our peer resource coordinators and was expressing suicidal ideation. And so we were able to call the local non-emergency number and get a mental health crisis team out to talk with him. They came out, they sat with him. They were with him for a good hour and a half. And finally, with the big smile on his face, he left our office with the two mental health resource people and was able to get his needs met. So it really does work, both 988 and the local non-emergency numbers. So please do use those whenever you're encountering somebody that might be in crisis. Now, there's also some spiritual questions that typically come up, and I like to include this just simply because most of the people that I end up talking to belong to some sort of spiritual community. And a spiritual community, if you're a member of it, can be a tremendous resource and support, both for you as a family member, but also for you as an individual that's experiencing a mental health issue. So the questions to ask, in this case, God or whatever deity it is that's part of your spiritual beliefs, what's their role in your mental health recovery? What kind of things do we, as part of our dogma in that spiritual community, expect from our deity when it comes to our mental health recovery? There are some communities that say, place your faith in the deity's hands and all will be taken care of. There are others who feel as though, medical science and other methodologies have a place. So you really want to know what that situation is. Also, how has my spiritual community supported mine or other people's struggles with mental health? Again, they can be incredibly supportive, but they also can sometimes be incredibly destructive, depending upon the belief system and how that jives with your mental health recovery or your loved one's mental health recovery. Because there are, as the last one says, some contradictions and conflicts between the beliefs in spiritual communities and the science around mental health conditions. There are some spiritual communities still to this day who believe it's demon possession or a character flaw. So we really want to make sure that we, as part of a spiritual community, understand where those conflicts may exist, if they do, and how we resolve them. And we don't have the answers to those questions. Those are individual answers to those questions that each person has to face. But those are often struggles that we see people within spiritual communities are facing, especially when there are some contradictions or issues there. So those are some spiritual questions to ask yourself and your community when you're dealing with yourself or someone else in recovery. And then, of course, the solution. What's the solution to all of this? We got this huge issue, these huge problems. What's the solution? Well, one of the solutions, it certainly is not the be-all, end-all, because there's lots of infrastructure solutions that need to be addressed as well. But we as individuals can do things every day to really change the conversation, talk about it. And when I mean talk about it, I mean lean in and talk about mental health. I find that my peers talk about lots of things. We talk about our medical issues. We talk about colonoscopies. We talk about all kinds of uncomfortable things, but we don't tend to talk about mental health. So we want to talk about mental health and what it means, what it looks like, and perhaps if we have concerns, then get those out in the open. Ask the question if you find someone that is in despair or in distress or is just uncharacteristically behaving in a way that you're not used to. Ask the question, are you okay? You don't seem to be yourself. Excuse me. Is there anything that we can do? And of course, be prepared to address that if there is. Change the language. All right. Language really does matter when it comes to creating a safe space and an environment for people to talk about mental health issues. A couple of examples that we use when it comes to language is when you refer to someone who has schizophrenia. Often we refer to that person as being schizophrenic, or refer to that person, another person, as being bipolar or being OCD. People are not their disease, no more than their cancer, diabetes, or heart disease. All right, they're not their diagnosis. And the sooner we separate the individual from the diagnosis, the better we're able to deal with assisting them or ourselves in recovery. They're two separate things. The person has a disease, they have an illness, they have schizophrenia. They are not schizophrenia. They are not bipolar. They are not their disease. They are an individual with lots of individual characteristics, one of which includes having an affliction like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. So change that language around referring to people as their disease as opposed to having that disorder. Another piece of language that's really important is when you're referring to someone who has died by suicide. Or the way that we commonly refer to it or have is someone committed suicide. Well, commit indicates that it's a sin, a crime. It has some real negative connotations, and it really can restrict one's willingness to talk about it. Excuse me for a second, but I have an office mate here who happens to be a little Yorkie Terrier who wants up. So hold on a second. Up you go. That's what happens when you work in a home office, is that you end up with interruptions that you don't normally expect. And if I were on camera, I'd show you a picture of this adorable little creature, but maybe we'll be able to share that someday. Anyway, back to language. So when you refer to someone who died by suicide, using the word commit can really create an environment where it feels like you're being judgmental. And that can make it very uncomfortable for someone who might be having suicidal ideation or has had suicidal ideation and wants to share their story, but feels that they can't because there's some judgment in the particular audience. So language really does matter, and changing the language really does do things like change the perception. Okay, sharing stories, which is something that we want to do by creating a safe environment, is really the kind of thing that changes lives. It saves lives. We know that as a peer-based organization, okay, that sharing stories really does save lives. So we want to open up the conversation and let people feel comfortable talking about it, because recovery is not only likely, it's more likely that you'll recover from a mental health condition than it is from heart disease, diabetes, or cancer. Understand that recovery from a mental health condition is typically a process, not an outcome. So there are times, there are exceptions where there are people who have been, and I'm using finger quotes, that have been cured of their mental health condition. But typically what happens is we learn to live with it, and we learn to live with it very successfully. There are countless examples of people who have successfully dealt with a mental health condition and been successful in whatever criteria they use in their lives with proper treatment. And that involves a holistic approach to it. But what all of those things do, all of this change, which is seems to be such a challenging and often considered a four-letter word these days, what all of this change leads to is it changes the outcome by stopping the stigma. That is the single biggest obstacle to people seeking help, is stigma. And again, this is a question I would ask in a group, and typically we have these wonderful official NAMI Clackamas stress balls that we hand out to the person that comes the closest. I'm just going to go ahead and reveal the answer to you. The average time between someone suspecting they have a mental health condition and actually seeking treatment for it, dramatic pause, 11 years. Now, that is not a result of access to services typically, or cost of services. All right, it's stigma. It's understanding that when someone admits that they've got a mental health condition, suddenly perceptions about them change, and sometimes radically. Their character can come into question. Their competence can come into question. Virtually everything that they do can be second guessed and come into question. And it's not the kind of thing that people with a mental health condition want or need to deal with, especially if they're starting to edge towards crisis or in crisis. So we really need to take the steps to change the conversation, the language, and the perception so that we can change the outcome. And that's something we all can do while we start working on infrastructure changes that are going to be so important to recovery. So those are some of the solutions. Now I'm going to talk to you a little bit about what's a NAMI. Okay, for those who don't know, NAMI is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the largest grassroots organization in the country with about 700 affiliates. They're usually broken down by county. We have 16 affiliates in the state of Oregon, including Clackamas, Multnomah, and Washington. We provide at NAMI Clackamas, like all of our affiliates do, education classes and presentations, support groups, and resource navigation. Now, resource navigation is something that we provide in Clackamas that isn't always available in all the other affiliates. They do have the same education programs and support groups, but not everybody is able to provide resource navigation, because virtually all of our services are provided by volunteers with lived experience. Okay, so it really is important for us to have some volunteers. And when we don't, or when the affiliate doesn't have volunteers, it really becomes a challenge for them to be able to provide programming. So we end up with 7 staff people at NAMI Clackamas. There are 4 part-time and 3 full-time. As you can see, I'm the Outreach and Development Manager. We have an Executive Director. We have a Latinx Outreach and Education Coordinator, who is our newest addition, and giving us an opportunity to really invigorate our programming, our culturally adaptive programming for the Latinx community. And then, of course, let's see, let me see if I can get to, here we go. This is our mission statement. I think the most important thing in that whole mission statement is the fact that we've been delivering these services since 1978. Evidenced, of course, by the fashion statement, by the people in the picture. You can see they're all wearing tie-dye t-shirts. We've got a lot of lived experience, so we do tend to have a pretty good handle on wherever we speak. And then what we provide education classes. So what you'll see across the top, there are 3: family-to-family, peer-to-peer, and basics. Those are all multi-week classes. Family-to-family and peer-to-peer are 8-week classes. As you might imagine, family-to-family is just that. That's for family members people who identify as caregivers, who have loved ones or people they care for or about that are having that have a mental health condition. Peer-to-peer is for individuals with a mental health condition. They work on a recovery plan. It's a really good opportunity for someone who has a mental health condition to not only learn more about what they have, but also learn from both us and each other on ways that they can cope with their situation and live their best life. And the NAMI Basics is a 6-week class, and that is for parents of younger kids, parents of middle, high school, even younger elementary school children, where these developmental issues can often get confused with mental health issues, both ways. Normal growth behaviors can be confused with a mental health condition and vice versa. So we really want to know the information around what's what. We also want to know how to advocate for our young folks. Especially at those ages, they need advocates. They need people to advocate for them because they're typically not able to express that themselves. And so NAMI Basics will also give you some tools for advocating for your children, both in school and around other services that they might need to access. So family to family, peer to peer, and basics are our 3 classics. Basics is available, they're all available in person and online at this stage of the game. Basics is available on demand as well. And it's NAMI understanding nationally that generally speaking, parents, caregivers with younger children tend to have a bit of a hectic life by comparison, perhaps, to the rest of us. And so access is really critical. While it's really, really important to be in a group face-to-face, if at all possible, with other people who are experiencing what you're experiencing, access is really paramount when it comes to the information that you need, especially as the parent of a young child. So NAMI Basics is available on demand, which means you can access any one of those 6 modules anytime you want, in any sequence you want, and gain whatever information you need when you finally get your break at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning and are able to actually focus on what happened during the day and what you might need to know to face the day tomorrow. So those are the classes that we offer. De Familia a Familia is another class that's family to family, that's culturally adapted for our Latinx community. Family and Friends is a presentation that could go anywhere from 2 to 4 hours, depending on the audience. And it really is family to family condensed down. So it's really drinking from a fire hose, but if that's all the time you got, it's really essential and important information. In Our Own Voice is one of my favorites. It's I call it the ultimate empathy builder, because In Our Own Voice is a presentation that has 4 pairs of people on video and 2 people live. And they talk about their journey with a mental health condition from discovery through recovery. Again, remembering that recovery is a process, not an outcome. And they talk about it very frankly, very openly, and it really does humanize this thing called mental illness. It really puts faces with mental health conditions so that we understand that, it happens to anybody, anytime, for any particular reason, and there are coping mechanisms, therapies, and other recovery methodologies that really do work, and people can live their best lives while living with a mental health condition. In Our Own Voice is great. It's about an hour and a half. We've done it in schools in the past. It really is geared a little bit more towards an older audience, though. So I might suggest, though, if you belong to a group or an organization where you could use an empathy builder, as well as some great information about mental health conditions, In Our Own Voice is a great choice. Ooh, that rhymes. I have to remember that. Compartiendo Esperanza. That is Sharing Hope. It's, again, a culturally adapted program, like a mental health 101 conversation with folks from the Latinx community that really is a very effective way to get information out. Ending the Silence. That's a program that you all might be most interested in, and some of you may be familiar with, because that is a program we've been doing for a number of years in most of the schools within North Clackamas and other Clackamas County school districts in middle and high school health classes. It fits really, really well into a health class curriculum. So we come in with 2 presenters live, excuse me, and some video representation of and slides, and present to the youth in the class the stories from the one individual who's there who has had a mental health condition, probably still does, when they were an adolescent through middle and high school, and then a parent or a caregiver of someone who did. And so they share their story and their experiences, along with a lot of good information about mental health, the The students walk away with a crisis communication card, which is things to say, questions to ask, and places to refer themselves or other people to. And then they have a sheet of paper, how to help a friend, which is really some essential bullet points around what to do if you encounter a friend that might be in crisis. Great information. If your school has not done Ending the Silence, please do request that they do. All they need to do it is get in touch with us and we'll make the arrangements. And then QPR is Question, Persuade, and Refer. It is not an official NAMI program, okay, but we are trained to present it. And so we do. And people have referred to QPR as CPR for people with mental health conditions. It really is an intervention technique, question, persuade, and refer, that really proves to be very, very effective when dealing with somebody who is expressing suicidal ideation and in crisis. So those are our programs, our education programs that we have. And then we do support groups. We have 2 individual support groups right now, a connection support group, which is for people experiencing mental health conditions. And currently they happen 3 times a week. So we have a Tuesday evening, a Wednesday afternoon, and a Sunday afternoon connection group that meets every week. And then we have a family support group. We have 3 of those. They meet monthly, first Monday, second Tuesday, and third Saturday. And those are all designed, again, they're peer-led and they're designed to provide a platform and an opportunity for people to share their stories, to understand and appreciate the fact that they are far from alone. There are other people out there who not only are trying to cope with the same situations that they are, but have the same issues, have the same frustrations, and perhaps have some coping mechanisms that they can share. So those are 2 things. Magic happens when those kind of groups get together. They really, truly do. So those are our support groups. And of course, we have a peer resource connection. Again, my finger is going a little bit wild here. So our peer resource connection is a place for someone who is either in crisis or anticipates that they may be in crisis, or someone who cares about them. So anyone who's affected by a mental health issue, our peer resource connection can help with referrals and navigation. So when I say referrals and navigation, I don't mean just saying, okay, call these people, see you later. No, they will make sure that you get access to the resources that you want and need, and help you navigate through that bureaucracy that you're often faced with. The last thing in the world that somebody in a crisis needs, or someone dealing with someone in a crisis needs, is to have to navigate through some bureaucracy. And so our peer resource folks who are peer support specialists, they're trained peer support specialists, can help you do is to walk through and navigate that bureaucracy that often becomes anywhere from a speed bump to a huge obstacle to gaining access. And you can see it's anything from NAMI programs, of course, to other resources, OHP marketplace navigation services. We don't offer them, but we can help you find them and make sure you get connected with them. Bus passes. We can provide bus passes for people that are dealing with mental health conditions. So lots of different things that our peer resource connection can do. They are a great resource when it comes to what do I do next? Where do I go? I don't really know. Well, we can help you find out, and we can also help you navigate those. So that's our peer resource connection. We also have another special project, support for adults in custody. We're finding that the jails have become the current place to house people with mental health issues, especially because there isn't enough adequate housing outside of the jail. And because we're just seeing a tremendous uptick in people with mental health conditions. And so we are providing classes 3 days a week for adults in custody in the Clackamas County Jail. We also provide volunteers at Mental Health Court and at Aid and Assist, which are 2 programs for people and their families that are experiencing mental health conditions and happen to be in custody. So that's one program that we're doing that we've just launched. And we've also got 2 new support groups that'll be coming online. Latinx only support group. That is going to be starting October 25th. That's going to be in person. The only one of our support groups these days that is in person. The rest of them are still online, although we are working on getting them into in person. And then an online support group starting in November for LGBTQ plus communities, people who identify with that community and have a mental health condition. So these are both groups for people with a mental health condition, one for people that identify as Latinx, the other one who might identify with the LGBTQ plus community. And those are specific, and those are based on feedback that we solicit and get on an ongoing basis from the folks that we serve. So those are 2 things that have been expressed as being real big needs. So those will be starting in October in person for Latinx and online in November for folks from the LGBTQ plus community. And then, of course, the one thing that we do offer is all of our services, all of the things that I talked about. Everything that we offer is barrier-free. No diagnosis, no referral, no insurance, no cost. We don't bill anybody anything. Well, we do occasionally bill the county because they provide some funding. But no, we don't require any of those things. It's completely barrier-free. Walk in the door, pick up the phone, and we're there to do everything that we can to give you the service that you need and make sure you access the things that you need. Here's a quick look at our board of directors. I mention this and I show this only because besides the fact that there may be a few people you recognize, Bob Sealander up in the top left is the person who brought mental health court, the judge who brought mental health court to Oregon, specifically to Clackamas County. And thanks to him, we have a court that deals a court system that deals specifically with folks with mental health issues. Captain Eby down the bottom left is the jail commander. And he is, again, very responsible for the fact that we are in the jails doing programming for adults in custody. And then Chelsea Jones in the middle at the bottom is an ADA with mental health court, someone, if you or a loved one is in custody for some reason with a mental health condition, she's very likely going to be someone that you're going to be dealing with. Very empathetic, and obviously being the mental health court ADA understands very clearly what some of the issues are that are facing folks with mental health conditions. So those are some of our, some of our board of directors. And then volunteers. You know, we need volunteers for a variety of things, but I think I mentioned that all of our classes and all of our support groups are, with only a few exceptions, are delivered by volunteers with lived experience. So these are volunteers that have a mental health condition, that teach a peer-to-peer class or facilitate a connections group, or people with family members that teach a family-to-family class or facilitate a family support group. We do have a few staff. I, in particular, am a certified family-to-family teacher and a family support group facilitator. I fill in when there's an absence or when we have to start a class and we don't have two teachers to do it. I will often fill in. So occasionally staff will fill in both as peers and as family members, but by and large, we rely on volunteers to be presenters, teachers, and facilitators. We also obviously need them like every other nonprofit does for outreach, fundraising, event planning, things like that. We provide free training and support for all of our presenters, teachers, and all of our other volunteers. Lots of recognition. We really do so appreciate our volunteers because, as I said before, without volunteers, we cannot effectively deliver our programs. So if you or anybody you know is interested in volunteering, there is a volunteer coordinator email there. I'm going to make sure that Mary Kay has a PowerPoint, a PDF of this PowerPoint, which will have direct links for anybody that wants to volunteer or just get more information about NAMI. So we like to say good things happen when people in crisis meet people who have been there. I actually, as an experienced family-to-family teacher and family support group facilitator, honestly believe that magic happens. That's not just good things. It's magic. When people realize and understand they are not alone, there are other people out there who are going through what they're going through, and they share their stories, they share their frustrations, they share their issues. And that experience alone, forget solutions or techniques or anything else, that alone is often what it takes to get somebody through a crisis. So it really is a good thing when people in crisis meet people who have been there. So you now get a chance to see the little guy that was interrupting us before, but it's not live. It's obviously by photo. And this little guy's name is Carlin. And again, I would usually ask the audience if anybody has any idea where that name came from. And for those who don't already, he is named after George Carlin because he makes us laugh so much. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'm going to ask for any questions that you might have.
I love how you have a picture of your dog, but not you, and we won't still get to see who you are, but thank you so much, Gary. You touched on so many things that I know our community is seeking. And I had actually written down a bunch of questions that I was going to help ask to get started, and then you answered a bunch of them. But I want to encourage everyone, we have about 15 minutes. And if you have questions, I encourage you to type them in the Q&A for Gary, and we can read those out so that everyone can hear your question. You'll be anonymous, but they'll hear your question and Gary can answer them. But while you're typing and thinking of your questions, I'll get us started with a couple. I'm assuming, because as you were going over all of those classes, that is wonderful. And I know so many of them, I think, are things that our community has been asking about. If someone goes to www.namicc.org, is that where they would see the classes and be able to sign up for them? Is that how simple is
Absolutely,
it?
yes. That's where they would go. That's where they would get the information that they need. In fact, what I can do is let me do this. I'm going to just share my screen again, and I can show you just exactly what our website looks like. Hang on just a quick second. Here we go. Share screen, and the website is right there. There we go. Let's share that. So you can see, if you can see that, there's our, that's actually a slider on our homepage, which shows all the different programs and services. But actually, if you go to the homepage, Suicide Bereavement Group is another group that we've got. This is some information about tardive dyskinesia. We're really big on trying to make sure that people understand that. This was our annual dinner auction that we had. But if you look along the top, you'll see home, you'll see about, you'll see programs. So about is going to give you information about who we are, programs, the education classes, support groups, one-on-one peer support. So if you want to take a class, right, click on classes, you get to basics, peer-to-peer, and family-to-family. Click on registration, and voila, you just go to our registration link, and you can register for any of the classes. Okay, so all of that is available on our webpage. And along with just about everything else, you can see there's all kinds of different resources, especially specific to groups and ways to get involved. Our calendar of events. So if you're looking for something on our calendar, you click on the calendar and it'll bring up all of our current events and activities that are posted, including our support groups, etc. So that's our webpage. Anything you ever wanted to know is there, and all of them are very easy to access and very easy to register for.
Okay. Well, I'll be posting your link on our website and other places, so our community has multiple access points and how to reach your website and find those resources. And I appreciate you sending me these slides as well, because we'll put them along with this recording. I see here, I think we have a question that came in. Oh, we have a couple here. One question is, how can we get more information, training into our schools? Our kids need to know how to converse with friends. So I don't know if Gary or one of our LOSD Cares professionals want to share ways in which we have these conversations with children. And I know we have worked with NAMI over the years. I don't know if you have an example of that, or it's something that we can look at exploring more of. I don't know if any of them, well, you guys are thinking about that. I'm gonna go to the other question we have. Okay, this person asked, and I think I actually know the answer because I learned this year and I heard Gary say it, but I'll share it out again. Instead of saying that someone, quote, committed suicide, what is recommended terminology? And I learned that we don't say committed suicide, but instead we say died by suicide. And Gary, I think you touched on that. I don't know if you want to expand on it anymore.
Yeah, well, and there are other people. There are some people that say completed suicide. I find that to be a little awkward or uncomfortable. Took their own life. Okay, that's another way to refer to it as opposed to committed suicide. But yes, we do want to avoid that. So took their own life, died by suicide, completed suicide. What we want is non-judgmental terms that indicate empathy rather than judgment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I will say too, back to that original question, we do offer ETS in classrooms in high school and middle. That is not the be all end all. That's actually a primer. It does provide some information around suicidal ideation and suicide prevention. There are questions to ask. There are things to say and do. But really, we work in many instances also with the local school counselors to ensure that there's a continuum so that when we do our Ending the Silence programs, talking about the resources that are available right there in their school, right there in their community for them, that they can rely on. So it's not just a matter of providing a little bit of education and some tips and things and moving on, but really, nurturing and not creating, because it's already there, but nurturing that continuum of care so that the students know that there are other people and other resources available to them.
Right. You answered a question. You said ETS in the beginning, but you meant ending the silence. That's the acronym for it.
All right. Yeah. I sometimes
Okay.
fall into the acronym trap.
That's okay. We all do an education as well. I don't know if there's any more questions. I will ask another one that I had that I hear often. So I know you referred to no barriers in accessing NAMI resources, but if a parent is looking for a diagnosis with their child, I know one of the things we often hear is very, very long wait times to get in with a therapist. I don't know if you have any advice in your experience on what might be the best first step or two for a parent to go that route as well.
Well, the 3 Ps: patience, persistence, perseverance. Okay, that's what it takes to navigate the system the way it exists right now. It's unfortunate that we can't do anything about the waiting lists. We don't have a magic formula or a back door or a secret entrance to any of these services. But what we can do, and what our peer resource coordinators and peer support specialists do a very, very good job of, is to hold your hand while you're going through all that and to help you access other services in the interim. All right. And to keep on top of waiting lists and other things that may occur, and try and find other resources. We have other affiliates. And now that we're doing online services, a lot of places are doing online therapy. We can often find resources through our other affiliates that are available in their communities that are online that can assist somebody, even if it's just in the interim. Sometimes being able to access somebody in the short term, even though we prefer long-term relationships with our therapists, engaging with somebody in the short term can help you over the hump until you're able to find somebody locally. So there are those kinds of resources. And I would say one of the first steps that every parent, every caregiver should take would be, to call us and see if we can be of any assistance in any way, shape, or form.
That's great. Yeah, I think when you talked about resource navigation, that's what I thought that might be, but I wanted to clarify. Any other questions? I know our LOSD Cares team was going to talk a little bit about working with NAMI in our schools. I have to say that when you first reached out to us and we made the connection, there was a lot of excitement, and now I see why. I knew a little bit about your organization, but I learned so much more on this call. So you're such a wonderful resource. Really address a lot of things that we hear from our community and what they need.
Well, and we appreciate that. I mean, the need is growing exponentially, it seems, and we're uncovering more and more folks. Our peer resource coordinators are overwhelmed with demand. Our classes are growing. We've got record numbers, and I mean, we've been at this since 1978. We've got record numbers of people in our classes and in our support groups, which is a good thing, but it's also indicative of a much, much deeper issue in our communities that needs to be addressed. And so, one of the things that we do as an organization, both statewide and nationally, and a little bit at the county, because county, they don't make policy that much as they administer funds and policies that are developed elsewhere. But we all lobby for a lot of things. 988 funding was one of the things that NAMI was instrumental in making sure that we got full funding for our 988 program, so that not only can we provide local 24/7 access to 988, you always had 24/7 access, but not locally necessarily, but also to fund the mental health crisis teams that can actually go out on calls either instead of or along with our public safety professionals to be able to deal with someone in crisis. And that funding was absolutely critical.
Okay. Yeah, I will say that not only providing the resources, but I know we have a very engaged community here in Lake Oswego who wants to help. And so as much as I want to also, I want to share the educational resources and the support resources, I also want to encourage people to get involved in NAMI. It sounds like it's a great place for people to put their energy and their support to really.
And it sounds, and it looks like in the Q&A that we've got other folks that would like to add their resources to the mix. So please, there are never enough.
I don't know. Before we close out, Gary, I don't know. I was gonna ask our LOSD Cares team to say a few words. I know their camera won't come on, so we'll hear their voice. But I don't know, Gary, if you had any last words for us before I hand it over to them for a minute.
Just don't forget we're there and we're accessible and available, barrier free to anybody who needs it. And I'm eager to hear what the other folks have to say.
Great. I think
I can talk,
perfect.
Kylie.
Thank you, Kylie.
Does that work? Awesome, thanks. So I am a social worker at Lake Ridge Middle School, and I know that every year our health teachers go through a portion with every grade to a certain extent. I think 7th grade is where they cover it maybe more deeply, of going over suicidal ideation. If you hear a friend say this, what do you do? Go over resources. They also bring in people from, I know, Clackamas Women's Services and go over resources surrounding like relationship abuse and other things that might sometimes overlap with this. So we have some active things in our health classes. Oregon Youth Line is another thing we've partnered with. They're really great. They have partnerships with schools where they can send you a bunch of swag, basically. So stickers, posters, with all their crisis lines. They do the text to teen line, and you just pay for shipping. You can get as many of those as you want. So I know a lot of the middle and high schools for sure do that, and spread it out into, having access for kids. It's mainly in like our counseling offices and with our admin. But I mean, I know also, I think at the high school level, LO High, I know their social worker has gone out a week in September because it's Suicide Prevention Month, and just being able to provide resources out like that. So, and there's trainings for staff that we do to let them know. And we've offered some QPR trainings for parents with some staff that are trained to host that too. So yeah, ongoing conversations for sure.
Yeah. Thank you, Kylie. I will say that and LOSD Cares offers these quarterly workshops for our parents and residents to get informed and learn something new and get connected with resources. Our LOSD Cares team, many of whom were on the call with us today, will be at the first annual LO Health and Wellness Fair next Saturday, October 14th, to share all the resources that we have offered in our schools. And our goal with that, because it will be not only our families, but also residents attending that event, is to bring more people into the conversation so that everyone is able to support our students and our family in our community and elsewhere.
And then with that, with LOSD Cares and also with our social emotional learning emphasis here in Lake Oswego, our elementary program supports mental health as well. And it looks a little different than how Kylie shared at the middle school, but we make it developmentally appropriate. One thing, for example, was every counselor at elementary does a lesson once a month. And our lesson in September included a slide on confidentiality. And specifically, the limits of confidentiality is when we're concerned that a student is unsafe or at risk to hurt themselves, others, or being hurt. And so with the upper grades, that even delved into a student experiencing suicidal ideation or feeling really negatively about themselves and their life. And so we do address it based on appropriate language with each grade level of what it is like to feel safe internally as well. And then another way that we support checking in on our kids' mental health is using zones and community circles. So zones are different ways of gauging your emotions and letting yourself and your classmates and teacher kind of know what you're needing. And so teachers do community circles in the classroom every day. Some even have different zones trackers just for kids to share how they're feeling, and then to give that guidance for staff or counselors or support staff to give students extra emotional support or attention. And then the last way that we support neurodiversity and mental health is we really emphasize throughout the year in our lessons different ways of learning and thinking, as well as different coping skills to use when you're having sadness or depressive thoughts or negative self-talk. And so we weave it in again for all kids in elementary as well, just in a more developmental way.
Thank you, Brittany.
And if I can, Mary Kay, there are two other youth-oriented resources in Clackamas County specifically. One is Youth Era. They have a drop-in center actually right in Milwaukee, and also one in Salem. And there's also another one called The Living Room, which is specifically for LGBTQ plus youth. And I've put links, I'm sending them to the hosts and the other panelists to both of those websites. Those are two tremendously effective peer-based organizations for young folks. Now, I don't believe that either one of them reach all the way down into early middle school, but I do know that they all cover later middle school and high school age groups. And I know Youth Era goes up to someone in their early 20s. I'm not sure about Living Room, but those are two local resources that are tremendous.
Wonderful. Thank you. I've heard of the Living Room. I hadn't heard of Youth Era, so we'll definitely share that out with our community. Well, with that, Gary, we are almost done with our hour together, but really, really, really appreciate your time and everything from the Mythbusters to all the resources that you've opened up to us. And thank you for all the work that you do with NAMI. It's wonderful. So thank you so much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the invite, and I look forward to hearing from everyone out there that needs help.
Great. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us today. Take care.